When shooting my Mauser 7184, one of the cases split after firing, making it hard to extract. That's due to the amount the cases made from 4570 brass need to expand in order to fill the chamber. The fired cases are shaped almost like a Coke bottle, wider below the shoulder, where the brass is thinner and can expand, and narrower as it gets down towards the base, where the brass is much thicker and retains its original shape. At its widest point, it measures .414, call it 415. Comparing against a sized but unfired case, you can see the difference. At roughly the same spot, the fired case is .490. That's 25 thousandths that the brass needs to expand, all in a fraction of a second as the round is fired. Even with annealing the brass first, it's inevitable that you'll see some cases splitting. Probably the same with careful fire forming as well. What I need is a parent case that has a larger base diameter than 4570. This measures just about a half an inch, right above the rim. I need something close to an original 11mm Mauser, which right above the rim measures .515. The problem is that case doesn't exist, at least not that I know of, not in a rimmed cartridge that's relatively easily available. However, when looking at available 11mm Mauser brass, I found this listing from Buffalo Arms. No, I'm not just buying cases, that's too easy. Plus they're out of stock and have been forever. Zooming in on the picture though, that's head stamped 5110. Well, it just so happens I have some 5110 brass. It's even made by Starline, just like the Buffalo Arms brass. The only problem is, its base is much larger, at 545. That's 30 thousandths larger, a big difference. Too much for a sizing die to resize. Those can only handle a difference of a few thousandths at the base of a cartridge. So how did Buffalo Arms use 5110 to make 11mm Mauser? Well, that's simple. It is sized down. Or I should probably say swaged, since the difference is larger. I'm going to make a swaging die, or ring, because it will end up looking sort of like this washer, only thicker. Then I can use a press to force it down the case. I expect it will get much tougher here, where the case walls become thicker, and eventually solid at the base. Then once it's bottomed out against the rim, I need to press it back off of the case. This piece of steel rod is a bit over an inch in diameter, which will provide enough wall thickness for strength. The first step is to drill out the central hole. A half-inch drill can easily create an oversized hole, so I'm starting off with a 31/64 drill. Then I'll bore it out to size. The bore is right on size at .515. But despite a sharp high-speed steel cutting tool, the surface finish is rough. For swaging, a polished bore makes sizing easier. Due to the oddball size, I don't have a reamer, though a 33/64 would have worked. I'm going to try freehanding with a Dremel in stone. I'll use it in the bore, but first I'll put a small chamfer leading into the bore. I only did a bit of grinding, because it's hard when the bore isn't a straight through hole. I'll get this parted off first. Now with a through hole, I'll grind it smooth again. I know this isn't the most accurate, but I'm just after a smoother finish. Nothing perfect. Grinding doesn't take off too much material. That's up to .517 almost. But the 2000s difference should be close enough to be handled by the sizing die later. It may not look it, but the surface finish is much better than before. I'm still looking for a better way of getting smooth bores. Solidly mounting the Dremel in the tool post would help, and also probably a better alloy of steel, maybe an expanding reamer or lap. Let me know if you have any tips. That's the completed swaging ring. But going from 545 down to 517 in one go is too large of a change. Realistically, I can only size down around 10,000ths at a time, which means I need 3 swaging rings. However, I made 4. From left to right, I have 533 as the first and largest step down, then 527, 521, and the 517 I showed being made. These are all made the same way, but a tip I have is that I made the smallest size first. That way if I overshoot the desired bore diameter, I can always make it larger. But before I use these swaging rings, I have some prep to do. The largest ring fits tightly over the end of the case, but the second largest doesn't fit over at all. The case mouth needs to be smaller to allow the rings to start swaging the brass. I'll size down the end. But before doing that, the brass is about to be worked hard. I'm going to anneal it first. Not just the case mouth, but the whole case. With more material near the base, I'll concentrate the torch there. You can see the difference in color between the annealed case and a new one. Annealing the base of a cartridge may be controversial, but I plan to only shoot moderate black powder loads with these cases. Any hardness lost will be work hardened right back into the case after swaging. Before I size the case mouth though, I'll apply some sizing wax to the end of the case. It's still too large to use an 11mm Mauser sizing die. So I have a garrote die in the press. The larger inner diameter will allow the case mount to enter the die and be sized down. That's all it needs to be sized for now. The annealing made it easy to resize the mouth this much. Then I'm finally ready to begin swaging the brass. I'll apply a healthy coat of sizing wax all over, including the base. Then I'll start with the first swaging ring, the one measuring 533. I made these with different chamfers on either end, larger on top here. That side will go down for consistency. Then I'll add this piece of scrap in order to press down the ring. At this point, pressing on the ring is very easy, but that's as far as I can get with this piece. To press it down further, I'm going to use a deep socket. This will fit all the way over the case. Right about here is where it starts to get real tough. But I'm able to get the ring to be flush with the rim. It probably took every pound of pressure this 3-ton press can apply, even with the cases being annealed. To press the ring back off of the case, I'll reverse the socket so that it's on the bottom. Then I have this piece of 3/8 rod with a small nub on one end. This fits inside the case, with the nub centering it on the primer flash hole. Then I'll press it down. And it drops free. With the case removed, I'll measure the base diameter. I'll set the calipers a bit above the true base. I'll explain why later. This is measuring .534. Some spring back with the brass is expected, or it could be due to the difference in measuring tools, measuring a bore versus an outside diameter. Next I'll continue to swage the brass, with each smaller ring, and with more wax each time. After working through all 4 swaging rings, that's measuring .517. That means I was able to reduce the base diameter by 28 thousandths. But that material needs to go somewhere, and with the 2nd through the 4th dies, I was unable to get them all the way flush with the rim. Instead, they pushed material down. This is why I measured a bit above the rim earlier. I thought this material might be brittle and flake off easily, but it's stuck on there. I'll need to cut this off instead. On the lathe, I have the collet chuck and my homemade stop installed. To trim the base, I'll use a parting tool. I'll set it against the top edge of the rim, then slowly feed it in. I want the cut area to be flush with the rest of the body of the case. When the cut just starts to widen, I know I'm there. A comparison to a piece of 4570 brass shows that I'm not done with this area just yet. The 4570 and the 5110 at the start both have a very small groove ahead of the rim. I can't fit the jaws of the calipers in there to measure just how deep the groove is, but I'd estimate it to be around 5/1000. With no groove on the 5110, I'm not going to be able to fold the rim over thick enough. I ground this very narrow grooving tool from a high-speed steel plank. Again, I'll butt it up against the rim, then feed inwards. I'm feeding in until it just starts to cut. Right there. Then I'll go in around 10/1000. Actually a bit more, say 12/1000. That will result in the groove diameter being around the same size as it is on the 4570 case. For repeatability, I need to rely on eyesight and the lathe dials. You can see that the jaws of the calipers just don't fit in there. They're too thick. Now I'm ready to fold the rim over. I'll add my bearing tool and rotate the tool post so I can press it at an angle. Then it's just a matter of applying pressure while watching an indicator off camera to see how far the carriage is moving. I'm advancing the same 30/1000 as I did previously when making cases using 4570. Annealing the base and cutting the groove certainly helped this process to be a lot easier. Next, to shape the rim, I have two tools installed in one tool holder. The flat bit on top to reduce the diameter, and the curved bit below to cut the A base. Using these together will help speed up production on multiple cases, but with one, it'll take some trial and error to set it up correctly. I'll start by trimming the diameter. I'll get an initial measurement. 600/1000. I'm targeting around 585 to 590. $589. That's good enough. Now for the A base. I'll establish an initial cut to give me something to measure off of. I couldn't fit the calipers on camera, but this was measuring around 20 thousandths deep. I'm targeting 30 thousandths. That's spot on. Now that I've established how deep to cut, I can repeat this on subsequent cases easily, but the first case always takes the longest. And although it looks done, it's not quite there yet. With the cartridge's base being squeezed smaller, that impacted the primer pocket. This is measuring .192. It should be around 205, a small press fit for a 210 primer. I'll carefully drill it larger. That's as far as I'm going with the drill bit. I usually use large pistol primers anyway, which aren't quite as tall as the rifle primers. Then a quick chamfer before I can finally remove the case. I'll measure the rim thickness using this block that's 310 thousandths thick. The rim looks to be 87 thousandths. That's right where it should be, and right where the 4570 brass was measuring previously. One thing I haven't mentioned previously is that if you're doing this yourself, make sure you have a shell holder that will fit the thicker rim. This is an RCBS number 22 for 11mm Mauser and 43 Spanish. Now I have the correct sizing die in the press, and I can begin sizing the case. I'm doing a little bit at a time, stopping to apply more sizing wax before sizing some more. This is the final result. With how much effort sizing took, this could have probably used another round of annealing on the case mouth, but the rim held up well. There is a small mark left by the shell holder here, but that's no concern. I did trim this case to length off camera as well. There is this line here, near the base. This is as far down as the size and die swage the case, so there is a very small step here. I should probably make another swaging ring to avoid relying on the size and die to bring this down. Something a bit undersized, like 513 or 514 would be best. That would also lessen the effort required to size the case. I'm not going to lie, to get this finished piece of brass did take a lot of work. The swaging rings needed to be made to a fair level of precision. And even with them already made, swaging another piece of brass is probably around a 5-minute process at least. That's just reducing the base diameter, not to mention the time required to thicken and shape the rim. That being said, I am confident these will perform better on an 11mm Mauser compared to the 4570 based brass. They don't need to expand as much, or at all, so the risk of cracking is minimal. They also would hold a few more grains of powder as a result of the body being larger. Though with how much work it took to get here, whether it's worth the effort is up for debate. If you're the type to put a dollar value on your free time, then this definitely isn't for you. Personally, I like to tinker, and when I see something like the brass cases shown earlier, I think, how can I do that? Thanks for watching.